Maybe you're building something that others don't understand. And deep down, you're starting to wonder if you missed it, if maybe it's your fault. But God has not forgotten. Faith doesn't just look crazy. Sometimes it seems outright cruel. You're trusting, you're obeying, you're doing the work that God has called you to do, but you don't yet see the fruit from all your blood, sweat, and tears. Meanwhile, others seem to be enjoying the blessings that you're longing for. Things seem to just click for them. And to make matters worse, others then seem to suggest that maybe you're the problem. You're the reason that the doors are not opening yet. And maybe you start to wonder this yourself. But this is the road of faith, and a road that others like Noah and Rachel and Job have also walked. And so you're in good company, with myself included. I first started to notice this when I applied to attend Covenant College, a private Christian college up Lookout Mountain. My two older brothers both attended state schools, and they couldn't understand why I would want to pay out all of that money to go to a private Christian school. My mom was a social worker, and she knew of a program that would essentially allow me to have a full ride if I wanted to pursue a major in social work, if I wanted to become a social worker. I couldn't explain it to them, but I felt called to go up the mountain. It didn't make sense on paper to do so, but by faith, I felt like I must go up the mountain. When I finished my undergrad and started my graduate studies, pursuing a degree in counseling, I went through seasons of unemployment. And again, the questions came of, maybe this is for another time. Maybe you shouldn't pursue your graduate studies now. Maybe you should just focus on getting a job and getting yourself established. And I couldn't deny the logic. The logic made sense. If you're unemployed, get a job, eat, put a roof over your head. And yet, while I applied for job after job for 2.5 years, those doors did not open. What did open was grad school and the ability to continue pursuing my degree. And so while it didn't make sense on paper to continue on that path, by faith, I had to continue walking through the doors that God opened for me. Even once I finished school and started in practice, the questions remain. Are you sure you want to go into private practice? Wouldn't working for an agency or organization provide more stable income? Certainly, these are the questions as I got married and started my family. Don't you need a job that has benefits to be able to take care of your family? Isn't that the wise, smarter thing to do? And again, on paper, I can't deny that logic. And yet, this calling to start my own practice and pursue the work that God has called me to do remains just as strong. And there are times in which I question, am I truly living by faith, or am I just being hard-headed and stubborn and doing what I want to do and just calling it faith? But on my low days, I remember the saints of old, stories like Noah, who was called to build an ark on dry land. From a human perspective, that had to seem like foolishness, that had to seem crazy. Certainly for outsiders, but I imagine even within his own family, there are questions of, are we sure that this is what God has called us to do? Is this the best way to spend our time as a family building this ark when we don't have a concept of what a flood is yet? But even though it didn't make sense, by faith, Noah still obeyed. And maybe you're being called to stay at a job even though you're ready to leave. It doesn't make sense, but there's a call to stay at that job. Maybe the calling is to move across country. And people are looking, why would you leave the comfort of your family and friends, community that's already established, to move across country where you don't know anyone? Again, it doesn't make sense on paper from a human perspective, but that calling may be just as strong. Maybe it's a calling to start your own work, business, ministry, in a time where the economy is uncertain. And again, the conventional wisdom is stick with what is safe, what is known, what is predictable. Don't launch out there on your own in such a time as this. But that calling, like Noah, may seem crazy from a human perspective, but by faith, we obey all the same. Maybe we'll be called to keep our heart open as we watch others walk through doors and receive blessings while we're still waiting. This was the case with Rachel, as she saw her sister Leah and even their maid servants have babies while she was still waiting. She started to blame Jacob. Jacob said, this is not my doing. This is God's doing. He's the one who opens and closes wombs. And so in our waiting, we must resist jealousy and resentment and trust that it is God who is opening and closing doors. Not to blame others, not to blame ourselves, but to simply trust that it's simply not our time yet. And in our waiting, we must also reject false guilt and blame, which sometimes we're blaming ourselves or others are blaming us for the situation that we're in. This was the case with Job, as his friends were blaming him for his suffering, that somehow there must be some sin in his life that he had not yet confessed, not yet repented of, and that was the reason why he was suffering. And sometimes that same accusation is launched against us, that we are suffering. The doors are not opening because there's some issue in our life that we have not yet dealt with, that we're being stubborn and hard-headed, and that's why these doors are not opening. And on one level, this makes sense. It's logical. The law of the harvest, that we will reap what we sow. And so if we're doing evil, if we are sinning, then it makes sense that our path will not be blessed. But as the story of Job reminds us, this is not always the case, that sometimes there's more going on than what meets the eye. And sometimes our suffering is not due to our own fault, but again, God is working things out behind the scenes that we're not aware of yet. And so if we've been called to do something crazy like Noah, to wait on God's timing like Rachel, or trying to make sense of our suffering in the meantime like Job, we must learn to trust that this is God's training ground and that he is exercising and maturing our faith for his glory. Maybe you're building something that others don't understand, or you're watching while others receive blessings that you're still longing for, or you're tempted to blame yourself or believe you're at fault for things not happening yet. Don't stop. Don't give up. Don't turn against yourself. Keep building, keep waiting, and trust. God has not forgotten. He still sees, and at just the right time, he will move. Let me know in the comments what you're building by faith, even though it might not make sense. If this resonates with you, then like, subscribe, and share with other men who might be tempted to give up because their faith seems crazy. In the meantime, check out this next video on the role of the villain in our story, that sometimes our blessing is not just delayed, it is actively opposed. But we might misinterpret what's going on in our story when we forget the role of the villain. So check that out here.